They believe that danger always comes from outside, from a declared enemy or a visible signal. What they never realize is that true risk arises in the inner silence of those who observe, calculate, and act when everyone else thinks they're safe. The idea of being the danger they never saw coming isn't about brute force, but about strategic invisibility. When you're unforeseen, you're unblocked. When you're undetected, you're uncontrolled. It's at this point that the tide inevitably turns in your favor. Social conditioning has taught you to be legible, predictable, and decent in the same mold as everyone else. Explaining yourself, justifying yourself, exposing yourself excessively, all of this fuels the reading of others. When someone can read you, they can predict you, and when they can predict you, they're already one step ahead. The cost of this is high. You lose initiative, react instead of lead, live under the invisible gaze of other people's narratives. The danger that is never foreseen arises precisely from breaking this cycle. You cease to be a reflection and become a shadow. The mechanism is simple and brutal. People want standards. They want to fit you into a label, into a predictable sequence of reactions. When you deviate from this, discomfort sets in. Discomfort generates attention. Attention generates control. In the professional environment, this is evident. Most people enter a meeting room with their bodies already betraying nervousness, with predictable phrases, with anxiety dripping from their voices. But if you maintain strategic silence, if you measure your pauses, if you observe more than you speak, you create an aura of presence, and this aura weighs heavily. Others sense it without knowing where it comes from. In the relational realm, the same gears work. The emotional game depends on predictability. Quick responses, constant outbursts, continuous explanations. When you break this rhythm, when you don't respond as expected, when you introduce calibrated silence, a void sets in. This void is power, because the other tries to fill it, and the more they try, the more they expose their own weaknesses. Unforeseen danger isn't an explosion. It's the surgical cut of indifference at calculated moments. In the digital world, the most fertile ground for predictability, the impact is even greater. The masses have been trained to react in seconds, to prove their innocence, to respond to the court of public opinion. But when you don't react, don't explain yourself, don't join the rush, you create an uncomfortable shadow. Your absence becomes presence, your silence becomes voice. And in this vacuum, power shifts to those who know how to sustain the tension. Tools like long pauses, short sentences, and a thinning of your presence transform your image. You stop being a body in the noise and become a fortress. A fortress doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be there. The common mistake is to think that predictability guarantees acceptance. In fact, predictability guarantees manipulation. Those who read you hold you captive. Those who can't predict, fear. The fear born of unpredictability is the foundation of involuntary respect. Metamorphosis begins within. You need to break the reflex habit. This rush to explain, to prove, to be understood. Every time you defend yourself, you open a flank. Every time you justify yourself, you give away ammunition. When silence becomes your natural response, you cease to be a fragile body seeking approval and become an insurmountable presence. Strategic solitude is the price. Not everyone can handle being seen as a constant threat. But that's precisely the point. It's not about pleasing, but about mastering your own energy. The danger they never anticipated doesn't scream, doesn't threaten, doesn't immediately show itself. It infiltrates, it observes, it decides the moment to move. And when it emerges, it's too late to contain it. This is the essence of silent power, being under the radar, invisible until the moment of choice. At the end of this first stage, a subtle discomfort remains. If you've always been conditioned to be predictable, how can you sustain the transformation without falling into the trap of artificial performance? The answer will come in the next part, where the game deepens and the mask of innocence is ripped away. The mask of innocence has always been his most comfortable prison. He grew up hearing that clarity is a virtue, that opening one's heart is a sign of honesty, that showing everything is proof of trust. This social naivete creates fertile ground for control. The danger they never anticipated only arises when you abandon the illusion that transparency guarantees respect. The opposite is true. The more you expose yourself, the more predictable you become, and the more predictable, the more disposable. The hidden mechanism that sustains this theater is the hunger for validation. The individual conditioned to seek approval acts as if living under an invisible spotlight, adjusting words and gestures to please. This hunger exposes, weakens, and opens the door to manipulation. That's when the tables are turned, because those who don't show need, who don't show themselves to be held hostage by applause, install a silent threat. No one knows if you agree or oppose. This doubt is corrosive. This doubt is power. In the professional arena, this is devastating. Imagine the group gathered, everyone expecting the same old predictability. Someone justifies themselves, another rushes to explain, a third begs for attention. You, on the other hand, observe. Your silence creates noise. There's no way to gauge whether you approve or prepare a counter-move. Insecurity spreads, and every word spoken by others becomes an attempt to read you. You dominate without moving a single piece. This is the cost of unpredictability, forcing others to reveal themselves while you remain impenetrable. In personal relationships, innocence is often even more expensive. Explaining everything, detailing every emotion, and meeting every emotional test seems like a virtue, but it's actually a weakness. Those who know their response routine control their emotions. When you strategically disappear, when you don't offer justifications, when you create a vacuum, the structure crumbles. Absence becomes a sanction. The other realizes they can't control the flow. And in this breakdown, the balance shifts. Those who wanted to measure their worth become the ones being measured. The digital world intensifies this game at a rapid pace. Most people live in the anxiety of responding immediately, explaining every detail, and demonstrating their innocence to strangers. This haste is the poison that weakens. By not reacting, by not offering public justifications, you become unreadable. Your digital silence breeds speculation, and speculation is more powerful than any defense. The crowd fears what it cannot frame. The court of public opinion feeds on predictability. Those who cut this food become an enigma that cannot be easily judged. The tools to maintain this position require precision. Calibrated silence is not an escape, it is a calculated presence. A prolonged pause is not an absence, it is a surgical cut that disarms others' anxieties. A short sentence is not poverty, it is a sword that ends the emotional game. Strategic disappearance is not a surrender, it is a movement of rarefaction that increases your aura. Each of these weapons is invisible, but they all produce tangible effects. The internal metamorphosis, however, is the hardest part. To sustain this strategy, you must free yourself from the need to be understood. The desire for someone to finally recognize your truth is a shackle. As long as you seek this recognition, you are held hostage. When you abandon this need, you become sovereign. Fortitude doesn't need applause. It exists silently, solid, inaccessible. This is where many fail. They can't bear the strategic solitude that accompanies power. They want power without the burden of misunderstanding, but the danger they never anticipated only arises when you accept being misunderstood without wavering. Who's in charge? What dictates the game isn't who speaks the loudest, but who endures the tension the longest. Maintaining silence in the face of pressure, enduring the inquisitive gaze without giving in, weathering the digital storm without reacting, this is true sovereignty. This is where the cycle begins to close. You become unreadable and therefore inevitably respected. However, this transformation still requires deeper cuts. The next step is not just refusing predictability, but actively manipulating others' framing. This is where the danger grows proportionally. This is where the game shifts from simple defense to invisible attack. The invisible attack isn't built on shouts or sweeping gestures. It's born in subtle details, in the ability to alter others' perceptions without even announcing it. Being the danger they never anticipated means mastering not only your own silence, but also the narrative surrounding others. Power lies not in winning an open dispute, but in shaping the terrain before the clash even occurs. The hidden mechanism that sustains this dominance is framing. Whoever defines the frame controls the interpretation of the frame. Most, in their eagerness to be understood, accept imposed frameworks. They explain themselves within parameters already established by the other, respond to accusations with the logic of the accuser, defend themselves in courts already biased against them. This is strategic suicide. The real danger lies in those who refuse to be framed, who respond unexpectedly, who do not enter the field outlined by the adversary. This refusal disconcerts. This deviation disarms. In a professional environment, framing manipulation is brutal. During a meeting, someone might try to diminish you with a veiled criticism. The expectation would be to justify yourself, explain yourself, and demonstrate innocence. But what happens when you ignore the criticism, shift the subject to another angle, and force everyone to follow your agenda? The criticism dissolves into thin air, and whoever tried to frame you is forced to silence themselves. You haven't just defended yourself, you've rewritten reality. This is the invisible attack, and its effect is devastating because it cannot be confronted directly. In personal relationships, framing is used as a constant test. Phrases loaded with bait, disguised provocations, demands for explanations. When you respond in kind, you've already lost. But when you return silence or a short sentence that ends the game, the expectation is shattered. The other person realizes they can't manipulate you. And this recognition isn't rational, it's visceral. The body understands before the mind. You can't be controlled. The silent threat takes hold without needing to be verbalized. In digital, framing reaches its peak. A public accusation, an attempt at ridicule, a collective attack. The expectation would be haste, desperation, and justifications. But if you don't respond, or if you respond in a timely manner with sparse and non-defensive words, the framing collapses. The masses need your reaction to exist. Without it, they lose fuel. Prolonged silence isn't absence. It's a devouring presence. Those who dared to attack realize they no longer control the narrative. This is the point at which the court of public opinion becomes blind to you. The tools for manipulating framing are sharp. The unexpected pause, which transforms the environment into discomfort. The subtle mirroring, which returns the other's own gesture until they lose themselves. The incisive question, asked not to expose oneself, but to extract. The strategic disappearance, which makes one's presence rare and therefore more valuable. All these weapons have one thing in common. They cannot be predicted, and what cannot be predicted generates silent respect. The internal metamorphosis at this stage requires almost clinical discipline. You must train your body not to betray anxiety, your gaze not to plead for understanding, your voice not to betray insecurity. Silence is not just an absence of speech, it is physical mastery. Indifference is not just an external act, it is internal detachment. When inner strength solidifies, your every gesture gains weight, not because it is theatrical, but because it is rare, controlled, and calibrated. Those who observe from the outside never understand the cost. Strategic loneliness increases. Few can bear to live with someone who cannot be manipulated. Many distance themselves. Others try incessantly to break down their barriers. This is the price of power, to be feared and desired in equal measure, to be a presence that simultaneously magnetizes and disturbs. But those who undergo this transformation no longer seek applause, no longer seek acceptance. They seek only sovereignty. At this point, you no longer react, you lead. You no longer explain yourself, you reconfigure. You no longer need to win petty fights, you shape the battlefield. This is where the cycle begins to reveal its true face. Being the danger they never anticipated isn't about being aggressive, but about being unreadable. It isn't about being brutal, but about being untouchable. Still, there's one step left. So far, you've learned to deny predictability, maintain silence, and manipulate framing. But total danger demands the ability to disappear and return in moments that shatter any attempt at control. It's in absolute rarefaction that the most powerful aura is born. That's what we'll explore in the next part. Disappearing isn't an escape. It's a strategy. Most people believe that constant presence creates security, that being always accessible guarantees relevance. The opposite is true. The more available you make yourself, the more predictable you become, the cheaper you sell. The danger they never anticipated arises when you introduce rarefaction. Calibrated absence transforms your presence into impact. What is rare carries weight. What is scarce becomes valuable. The hidden mechanism that explains this is simple. The human mind fills voids. When you strategically disappear, others spend energy trying to decipher your absence. They speculate, invent, project. The more they try to understand, the more they become trapped in your field of influence. You haven't said anything, yet you constantly occupy mental space. Silence becomes presence. Absence becomes dominance. In the professional world, this rarefaction creates an aura of authority. The employee who talks too much is dismissed. The one who speaks too much loses weight. But the one who chooses the right moments to intervene, who doesn't blend in with the noise, becomes a reference. The meeting becomes more tense when you decide to speak, because each word you speak is worth more than pages of speeches. Strategic absence also educates the environment. You're not accessible all the time. Anyone who wants your attention will have to earn it. In personal relationships, disappearing is a precision weapon. It's not childish neglect or cheap ego games, but rather withdrawing when the other person tries to box you in, when they try to drain your energy, when they demand predictability. Absence creates silence that the other person can't fill, and in this silence, hidden needs are revealed. Their need overflows, while you remain sovereign. Your return, in turn, cannot be banal. It must be imbued with calculated indifference, as if nothing had happened. This dismantles any attempt at control. In the digital world, disappearance is dynamite. The virtual environment is addictive to constant presence. Those who don't show up are forgotten. But precisely because of this, those who control your absence create myths. When you don't respond, don't post, don't engage in the game of urgency, you generate collective discomfort. People begin to speculate, create narratives, and become uncomfortable with your silence. Your return, even a minimal one, causes a disproportionate impact. It's the logic of scarcity applied to presence. Tools to sustain this rarefaction include precision cuts, ending interactions before they become habitual, not allowing your energy to become available unfiltered, and introducing long pauses without warning. This is how aura is built, not being seen all the time, but emerging when no one expects it. What is unforeseen becomes strength. What is uncontrolled becomes feared. Internal metamorphosis at this point requires discipline over one's ego. The desire to be remembered, to be seen, to be in the spotlight is an addiction. To disappear, you need to satisfy that hunger. You need to trust that emptiness works for you. This is counterintuitive. The impulse is to believe that absence means loss, but when you maintain silence, time works in your favor. Your image strengthens because it doesn't wear out. The cost is enduring the anxiety of not being able to explain yourself, of not being present, of not being constantly seen. The gain is that every time you appear, you make an immediate impact. You cease to be ordinary, you become rare, and everything rare dominates the imagination. At this point, you're no longer just unpredictable. You're a strategic ghost. Your absence weighs more heavily than the presence of many. Your silence is more eloquent than entire speeches. The game now isn't about responding or leading. It's about shaping the field with minimal presence. But the final cut is still missing. Up until this point, you've learned to deny predictability, manipulate framing, and strategically disappear. The conclusion requires closing the loop, showing how the unforeseen danger becomes definitive, transforming you into a presence that can neither be ignored nor defeated. This will be the final point of the metamorphosis. The cycle closes when you understand that the real danger lies not in acting more, but in acting less, and always at the right time. Everything built up to this point converges toward one state, being unreadable. When no one can predict your moves, you dominate the game without having to play. Being the danger they never anticipated is reaching this point of tactical invisibility and inevitable presence. The hidden mechanism that sustains this form of power is tension. Others can't bear to live without answers, without predictability, without guarantees. When you sustain the void without flinching, they collapse. The human mind prefers even bad news to prolonged silence, and it is at this point that you become sovereign. You endure what they cannot. Your calm becomes torture. Your absence becomes obsession. Your presence becomes an enigma. In the professional field, this translates into quiet authority. You don't compete in petty arguments. You don't wear yourself out with useless explanations. You don't seem anxious for space. When you speak, everyone listens because they know you don't waste words. Your rarity makes you the center of attention, even without seeking it. Those who try to diminish you end up wearing themselves out because you don't react. And when you finally decide to intervene, the framework has already been shaped in silence. In personal relationships, the effect is magnetic and uncomfortable. The other person never knows whether or not they have your approval, whether they've gained or lost your place. This constant doubt is corrosive. You don't need to raise your voice or create scenes. Just don't react as expected. Just maintain your indifference. Calculated absence becomes the most lethal weapon. When you return, you offer no explanations. You offer a pure presence, charged with power. This instills respect and often silent fear. In the digital world, the cycle closes with your image transformed into an aura. You're no longer just one user among millions. You're a rare presence. Your every appearance makes an impact, because it doesn't follow the logic of collective urgency. You don't need to respond to accusations. You don't need to explain your silence. Your absence itself works for you, spreading speculation, cementing mystery. The court of public opinion can't judge what it can't decipher. The ultimate tools are precision cuts, a short sentence that ends the game, a long pause that disarms haste, a disappearance that transforms absence into power, the silence that instills discomfort in even the loudest. All these weapons stem from an inner strength. You don't waver. You don't need to prove anything. You don't trade your energy for approval. This is the core. Complete metamorphosis is hard. You give up the addiction to predictability, cut ties with the need to be understood, accept strategic solitude as an inevitable price. Many will not bear your weight. Some will turn away. Others will try incessantly to decipher you. But no one can control what they cannot predict. You become an inevitable presence, a shadow that shapes, a silent force that sets the pace. At the outset, we left a seed of doubt, how to sustain the transformation without falling into the trap of artificial performance. The answer is clear now. You don't need to act. You don't need to create a mask. You just need to peel back the layers that made you predictable, cut off the reflexes that betrayed you, quench the hunger for validation that enslaved you. The danger they never anticipated isn't an invention. It's a revelation. It's always been within you, stifled by social conditioning. The cycle closes. The initial paradox is resolved. What seemed like weakness, silence, absence, indifference reveals itself as power. What seemed like security, predictability, explanation, approval reveals itself as imprisonment. You are now shadow and presence at the same time, silence and impact, absence and dominance. You don't need to be seen to be felt, and when you decide to move, it's already too late for anyone to stop you. Understand, there is no greater victory than being the danger they never anticipated. This is the ultimate metamorphosis. This is true sovereignty. Ritual. Write in the comments without explaining anything, just the phrase, "My absence rules the game."